you can end the season really well and ride that momentum in the off season and in the preseason and then in the regular season. Not saying that if you went on a 3-game winning streak, you're not going to lose a game. I'm not saying that, but things can look different. Things can feel different because of momentum. The Saints had one of the worst momentums. They had absolutely no, maybe negative momentum going into the season, and we're kind of seeing that it's remained the same, and I don't foresee much success from the Saints. The Panthers, on the other hand, and I'm looking kind of solely at Bryce Young, they actually had positive momentum ending last season. Well, no, they didn't make the playoffs anywhere close. Bryce Young was almost the butt of everyone's joke when you talk about the poster child of a failed draft pick. When you saw what C.J. Stroud was doing compared to what Bryce Young was doing their first year, it was night and day. People were saying that Bryce Young is one of the worst number 1 overall picks in NFL history. That's what was being said about Bryce Young. Towards the end of, he even lost his job. The man lost his job to Andy Dalton. And to put that into perspective, Andy Dalton, might I add, is 37 years old. So last year he was 36. But we talk about momentum. Bryce Young, towards the end of the season, maybe the last, I'll say 3 games, looked all of a number 1 overall pick is supposed to look like. It felt like the last 3 games or so, Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers had new life. It felt like, and it kind of, Bryce Young showed why he was a number 1 overall pick. Now, do I think that the Panthers are going to ride that momentum to the win the division and make it to the playoffs? Heavens no. I don't think they're that good. I was looking at this roster while I was doing this, and there's not much to wrap your arms around. I mean, you have J.C. Horn. You have Xavier Legette. You have Adam Thielen, but he's the vet, and he shouldn't really be depended on at this point of his career. You have Chuba Hubbard. Like, there's pieces. But this isn't a championship, let alone, I don't even think this is a playoff team. But if you want to admit it or not, and if obviously teams aren't going to come out and say this, because it's like, if you're one of the teams that comes out that says this, as a fan, it's like, why am I going to support? Because a lot of fans still have that delusion that almost every team is if they're the fan of their if you're a fan of a team, you have a Super Bowl chance. That's what almost every fan feels like. Almost, I said. Every fan feels like going into it. So if you come out, because it is true that not every team's goal is to win a Super Bowl. Teams, by training camp, by preseason, like, you kind of know where your team is. You kind of know the ceiling for your team. And I think the Panthers organization has to know. If they're a smart organization, this team right now is not a Super Bowl caliber team, let alone a playoff team. So you have to ask yourself, what is the goal? What should be, what at the end of the year, what is looked at as a successful season for a team that probably understands that they're not even close to a championship, and honestly, I don't think they're going to win a division. Well, it's simple. It's about player development. And you hope that by the end of the year, that small leap, 2, 3, 4 game momentum that Bryce Young developed last year carries into this year, and you ride that momentum throughout the season. You want to look up towards the end of the year and feel, okay, Bryce Young is one of the better young quarterbacks in the league. Bryce Young has justified why we drafted him number 1. You want to hope that by the end of this year, they start legit separating Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud. It's very hard to do because you see the success that C.J. Stroud had minus the success or the lack of success that Bryce Young had. They're always going, not always, but they have been synonymous with each other for as long as they've gotten drafted. You hope that by the end of this year, Bryce Young, not saying that Bryce Young is going to be better than C.J. Stroud, but you hope that he plays well enough that C.J. Stroud and that comparison is an afterthought. Because I want to explain this. For people that don't, do I think that C.J. Stroud is better than Bryce Young? Yes. Do I think that he is leaps and bounds better than Bryce Young? No. What I think it is, and I talked about this during the draft, and I talked about this, I think, towards the end of their rookie year. There's a theme that always finds its way into this podcast. There is a saying that I feel is constantly said on this podcast, but that's only because it is true and it is very important. And that saying is, fit matters. Situations matter. Where you're drafted to, a team that you're traded to, what the environment around you matters. And C.J. Stroud went to a team that had a thriving head coach, had an incredible draft for him, that had a lot of young new pieces, and that had a brighter future, and at the time of his rookie year, not last year, but his rookie year, had a better offensive line. So you put in a good head coach, good pieces around him, good offensive line, and a good, at least at the time, in what it seems like, a good front office, compared to what Bryce Young had. One of the worst offensive lines in football. No weapons to outside of Adam Thielen, but if I'm not mistaken, Adam Thielen got hurt Bryce Young's first year. And even that, Adam Thielen's not, you trade DJ Moore. So you're taking pieces away from Bryce Young. And there was nothing but instability around that organization. And to this day, it's gotten a little better, but to this day, it's still instability in Carolina. I talked about this last episode when we talked about Joe Burrow. Now, no, I'm not saying Bryce Young is Joe Burrow. Not even close. But what I'm saying is, it's especially in the game of football, one player it's very rare, almost unheard of, that one player can blanket all of the dysfunction. So Bryce Young went into a situation that he was the brightest of light around nothing but darkness, which over time, and again, when you're talking, there's, and I talked about it during the rookie year, there's some rookies, no matter where you drafted, that need more help than others. So, yes, I think in that instance, CJ Stroud didn't need as much help as Bryce Young had, but he had more help than Bryce Young had. So, fast forward to today. Again, you can ride momentum. And by the end of last year, Bryce Young looked really good. Yes, he still had his moments, but he looked really good. And you're hoping that Bryce Young rides that momentum and this team rides that momentum into this year. And when you look, you hope that they don't, especially with the Saints, you hope that you don't finish last in the division. That's a step up. And you're hoping that you're getting a clear vision of what you have. And you have a clear vision of you have your future quarterback. Because if I'm not mistaken, Bryce Young is only 24 years old. So you're hoping that by the end of this year, we're not questioning, or you hope that going into next season or the draft, I'll say you don't have to draft a quarterback. And I'm not saying he should be on the hot seat. Just solely because of what he's had to work with. But I'm looking at Dave Canales, the head coach. If those 3 or 4 games last year for Bryce Young was more of an anomaly instead of the norm, then we have to start looking at Dave Canales. And this is what I mean. Because I am not one of those people that are just that you should just fire head coaches left and right. I think that there are things that are worthy to be fireable and unworthy to be fireable. You can finish 2-15, but if your team plays hard every day, you may have suffered an injury, or you may just not have the pieces. I don't think that's necessarily the coach's fault. Maybe you just don't have the talent. Maybe one of your key players were injured. I get it. But if you go 2-15 and you just looks like your team is just leaps and bounds terrible, they don't even give effort, that's when you have to start looking at the coach. And in this instance, you have the number 1 overall pick. You had a number 1 overall pick in Bryce Young. We saw the latter end of the season how good he could be. If he reverts back to what he looked like maybe his rookie year or the beginning of last year, you have to start questioning when does player development kick in? When do you start looking at it like, okay, yeah, the quarterback that you thought was the future, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more towards the end of the episode with another situation, but the quarterback that you thought could possibly be the future is now regressing. Where's the development? I'm not saying he should be fired, but there definitely has to be a conversation there if there is regress. Because this division, at least not the entire division, but these last 2 teams, the Panthers and the Saints, there has to be a fight for some type of pride. Pride that you don't finish as the worst team in the division. For either one of those teams, that would be a positive at the end of the season. And the Panthers have a much better roster. Not much. Has a better roster. They have better pieces. And they have younger pieces. That's that. And they have no matter how you feel about Bryce Young, he's better than whatever the hell the Saints got. So your goal is to let's at least finish. Let's not finish. And that's not the goal for everyone. And I'm not saying that you should be necessarily reaching for that every year. But if you're not a Super Bowl caliber team, if you're not a playoff caliber team, that's what you're fighting for. You're fighting to latch on to something. And you're hoping that Bryce Young is that. So we'll see. Again, they have some good pieces. It's just, we'll see.
Oh, man, you stayed to the end of the video. I appreciate you. If you like what you saw, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss any content from your boy. You can also go back and watch past episodes, past clips, and don't forget that the Unpopular Podcast, new episodes drop every Wednesday and Saturday. Appreciate you.